It's well over 100 years of history. And I just love the history behind the people trying to get there and the sacrifices and the hardships they endured to make things happen at Mt Spokane. It's a skier's paradise. It always has been.
Father was an idealist in everything he did. It didn't make any difference if it was just a little piece of road or a road that would go for 30 miles right up Mt Spokane. It had to stay on a certain grade. He was 50 years ahead of his time.
Developer and businessman Francis H. Cook is fondly known as the father of Mt Spokane.
He was pretty well accomplished in Spokane.
Cook owned the city's newspaper called the Spokane Times. He was president of the upper house of the legislature, which created Spokane County. Cook also owned major properties on Spokane's South Hill, including the Manitou Park area, plus land on the Little Spokane River and Windermere areas.
And of course, right out his window was this big mountain sticking up. And he became fascinated with that. And he just had to get to the top. The view was breathtaking. So he wanted the citizens of Spokane to see that. And he was the constant promoter of Mt Spokane.
When Francis Cook started Mt Spokane, he was 58 years old. It was basically his last project, but he just loved the mountain.
At the time, the mountain was called Old Baldy because of its pronounced bald spot. In 1909, Cook purchased 160 acres at the summit from the Northern Pacific Railroad.
And then when he bought it, he changed the name to Mark Carleton.
His son Silas and a few of his other 11 children surveyed and built the original road to Mt Spokane by hand, starting out by using horse-drawn equipment. In 2 years' time, they got within 3 miles of the summit.
And it's interesting too, because I read some research from the Spokane County engineers. That road was in such perfect engineering specifications that they hardly altered it. When they regraded and rewidened, they followed the original route.
On August 23 of 1912, Francis Cook had a dedication for Mt Spokane. That's when he changed the name and dedicated the road.
A contingent of dignitaries drove up from the city to christen Mt Spokane, including Spokane Mayor W.J. Hindley, Miss Spokane Marguerite Mochi, Francis Cook, and Washington's 8th Governor Marion Hay. Cook also built 2 cabins on the mountain. One sat just 500 feet from the summit, which he used as a summer place while building Cook's Auto Road. In 1920, Spokane businessman Frank Gilbert and several of his associates bought Cook's part of the mountain for $32,000. It was held in trust for Spokane County, and 1 month after selling, Francis Cook passed away.
My father's prophecy that Mt Spokane would become a winter and summer playground is rapidly being fulfilled.
Skiing has always been popular in the city of Spokane from the very early days. They drove up in their automobiles. They parked alongside of the road before they would get stuck. And they would strap on their skis and off they would go. And the early skiers, if they wanted to walk up a hill, they would walk up sideways, stair-stepping up. And this took 2 or 3 hours just to ski down for 2 minutes. So that's how hardy they were and in great physical shape to be able to do stuff like that.
In 1927, the land, which included Cook's cabin, was transferred to the Washington State Parks Board for $1. In August of that year, 400 dignitaries came to a signing ceremony at the summit. At 1,500 acres, Mt Spokane State Park was now the largest in the state.
Almost everybody from Spokane at the time learned to ski at Mt Spokane on Cook's Cabin.
The only thing we had was 2 short rope tows up between Cook's Cabin and the summit. And there was only about 500 vertical feet, so it was a kind of a short run.
The gas-powered rope tows were quicker than hiking, although tough on the hands. But the 30 skis were even harder on the knees.
They were very long, 7.5 feet long. The bindings had cables to hold your ski boot into the clamp that we called the bear trap. It was just a clamp. There was no releases. If you fell, why, there were a lot of sprains and what they call skier's breaks at the time.
In 1929, William H. Coles donated 640 acres of land on the north side of the mountain. And under the leadership of his son, Cheney Coles, the Spokane Ski Club was formed in the early 1930s.
When Cheney Coles got involved, as a skier, he recognized the potential. Where else in this area could you go and ski like that?
The first skier lodge at Mt Spokane was in the very early 30s, and it was the Spokane Ski Club cabin. And it was a log cabin constructed by ski club members.
It was built on land that the Spokane Ski Club purchased from John Linder. And that was built on the bottom of the mountain near where the park ranger now has his home. And they had full-time caretakers, a couple, and they had 2 dorms in there, one for the men and one for the women.
In 1931, the Spokane Ski Club put in 2 rope tows.
They also ran on gasoline until electricity came to the mountain. A second club, the Selkirk Ski Club, put in an even longer tow.
It was an 1,800-foot rope tow. They called it the Selkirk rope tow, and that went directly off the top of the mountain now where the cell phone towers are, basically 1,800 feet down the northwest side of the mountain.
Jumping became part of the skiing scene in the 30s.
They had a small jump hill to train people for jumping, and then a large 100-meter jump hill. So they had people coming on a circuit from all over, a lot of people coming up to the mountain to do the ski jumping events.
Another thing happened on Mt Spokane. Back in the 30s, there was a young lady that came to meets on this mountain, and her name happened to be Gretchen Fraser.
Fraser went on to win a gold and silver medal in the '48 Olympics. Mt Spokane was host to many regional downhill and slalom ski championships. The club also put in lights for night skiing, and Francis Cook's original road was completed to the summit. A huge sun globe was erected at the top of the mountain on June 26, 1932 by the Spokane Federation of Women's Organizations.
It was pyramid-shaped, with the granite base came up, and at the top was this gigantic 4-foot copper ball.
Its purpose? To reflect the sun's rays for many miles in a tribute to fatherhood, as well as a memorial to the people of Spokane for being children of the sun.
When the ball reflected in the sunlight, you could see it from the city of Spokane.
Mrs. Dodd, the originator of Father's Day, unveiled the globe. It was later removed because of vandalism. The Mt Spokane Association formed in 1933 and included the Mt Spokane and Selkirk Ski Clubs, the Spokane Chamber of Commerce, and service organizations. The association purchased 500 more acres for future improvements. In 1933, work began on the Vista House, which was designed by Henry Bertelson of Spokane.
Beautiful place. The stonework is all native quartz from here on the mountain, hand-cut shingles for the roof, and it was a fire lookout through the 30s and the 40s.
The Vista House opened that winter to the delight of skiers. and photographers.
In 1938, one of the first ski patrols in the nation was formed here at Mt Spokane.
Ken Henderson founded the Mt Spokane Ski Patrol and acted as director off and on for nearly 30 years. The first aid room started in a corner of Cook's cabin.
I got back from the service in '64. I tried out for the ski patrol and got on. They needed somebody really bad. We were using what they call the Sun Valley toboggan. And the Sun Valley toboggan was just an old wooden toboggan, the kind that you see in the hardware stores. Then they had this wire litter on it called a Stokes litter.
The highly regarded Mt Spokane Ski Patrol started as an all-volunteer unit and remains so to this day. During the Great Depression of the 30s, President Franklin Roosevelt started a work relief program called the Civilian Conservation Corps.
And they were doing projects all over the country.
A camp which housed 200 young men was named for Francis Cook and was built on nearby Beauty Mountain. The CCC improved Cook's Road, added another road down the east side, and began building the much-anticipated Mt Spokane Lodge right next to Cook's cabin.
That lodge was open year-round. They had 7 rooms for rent. It had permanent year-round caretakers who happened to be the park managers. And they did serve meals there, mostly snacks. And they did have a dorm.
A $58,000 federal grant made the Mt Spokane Lodge a reality, and it opened in 1940. Mt Spokane's first chairlift and the world's first double chairlift was installed on the southern face in 1946. Spokane's Riblet Tramway Company converted an ore bucket mining tram into this wooden lift. It was called the Mt Spokane Ski Club Chair, and it was 3,300 feet long with a 1,200-foot vertical span.
And it was such a sensation that people come from all over the country to see what this double chair was all about. Even as swank as Sun Valley was, they didn't have a double chair. Movie stars and all the important people had to still go up by themselves.
The ride up the mountain could amount to a mini blind date.
So the first double to ride with your buddy or your girlfriend or your wife up to the top was great.
The Mt Spokane double chair closed just 3 years later due to damage from high winds and winter snowstorms. In the first of 5 plane crashes on Mt Spokane, on Halloween Eve in 1946, a former U.S. Army Air Corps flight instructor was killed as he flew home to Spokane from Montana. Rudolph Lanza smashed into the southeast side of the mountain. Then, in November of '47, 3 B-29 Super Fortresses were flying in formation over Mt Spokane when one of the bombers flew about 50 feet too low and crashed near the Bald Knob area, killing 4 crewmen.
They say the plane hit the mountain going 200 miles an hour.
It was very stormy. They didn't trust their instruments, and they just missed by a few feet, and they hit the trees.
The tail section broke off first. So the 2 guys, the 2 spotters in the back of the tail, kind of fell off into the trees. The rest of the plane continued forward, skidding through, making a path, and finally exploded and blew up.
Sergeant Marshall Fine and Sergeant Truman Haley survived the crash. Haley's sons returned to the crash site some 60 years later.
You'll see the 2 boys kneeling down, holding pieces, just looks like old pieces of tin or aluminum, and that's actually parts of the airplane.
As a remembrance, Mt Spokane Ski Trail B-29 runs across the flight's fateful path.
If you see pictures of that lodge and addition, you look at the surroundings and it was gigantic, it was huge.
The 50s brought major improvements to the mountain. First was a $100,000 addition to the Mt Spokane Lodge.
It was such a marvelous native with native rock, native logs. It was really a truly architectural treasure.
Everyone was excited. The skiers were excited for the opening day. The concessionaire, Al Metler, couldn't wait to open it. But everything came to a crashing halt on a winter night in January of 1952.
2 workmen were finishing the project when there was an explosion.
Eyewitnesses said the flames were shooting, several hundred feet in the air. And within an hour and a half, it was over. That was it.
Tragically, the electrician, Rulon Downard, died in the fire. And the original building plus the addition burned to the ground. The uninsured lodge was never rebuilt. A new lodge and chairlift were now at the top of Mt Spokane's wish list. In 1953, KXLY-TV built a transmitter at the summit of Mt Spokane, the tallest in the Pacific Northwest. Spokane's native son, Bing Crosby, was part owner and got in on some of the action.
He used to climb Mt Spokane when he was a little kid, so he was always fascinated with the area. And there are several pictures of him going up with a KXLY, probably television crew at the time, and snowmobiling on Mt Spokane. Those technicians at KXLY, I think, is an incredible story on how they got the supplies up there in the first place. And right when their transmitter building was completed, a gust of wind came along and ripped a portion of that roof off.
About this time, the Spokesman Review began sponsoring a ski school program, often sending buses up to the mountain with as many as 1,200 students in one day. By the mid-50s, the state had decided to move their ski area to the east.
Along with the help of the concessionaire, Al Metler, he formed the Mt Spokane Chairlift Association. They were able to build a chairlift, which is now called Chair 1.
If it wasn't for the Simchuk family, who owned the largest sporting goods in town that offered ski equipment and accessories, it wouldn't have been built.
The new double chair took you right to the summit near the Vista House. There was an unloading platform at midway, and 4 rope tows operated nearby.
And the lines were so long, when that was the only chair on the mountain, that you'd have to take a rope tow up to get into the line.
Lodge 1 was built at the bottom of Chair 1, and just below the lodge was a favorite area for beginners.
They called it Disneyland. Had to stop that after some copyright complaints, but had a lot of rope tows down there.
Night skiing became a popular option for those who worked days.
It was marvelous for us young people that had to work, because we could come up at night and they had that lit up very nicely.
61 was when this lodge was built and Chair 2 was built. So it was a huge expansion for the ski area.
Chair 2 became very popular with the young people.
The new double chair took skiers to the summit east of the Vista House, where you had incredible views of Spirit Lake and beyond.
Grooming in those days was a real low-tech, enterprise. We had old Tucker snowcats that would pull a big corrugated culvert around that was filled with concrete.
2 years later, another double lift was installed east of Lodge 2. Chair 3 went to the top of Half Hitch.
The worst one was September 10th, 1962.
Another plane crashed on Mt Spokane when a KC-135 tanker, flying from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, flew into the mountain, killing all 44 people on board. 39 were members of the 28th Bomb Wing, relocating to Fairchild Air Force Base.
But this is the worst tragedy ever in the history of Spokane, and a lot of people don't even know about it.
And then in 1967, another KC-135 crashed, this time returning from Hawaii. In 1972, the backside of Mt Spokane was opened up with the addition of Chair 4.
And that really gave the ski area that north-facing terrain that was needed. It held the snow a lot better, had less solar decay.
Chair 2 was shortened in 1977, and the lower portion became Chair 5, which serves the beginner hill.
I have been instructing at Mt Spokane for 25 years.
120 instructors teach more than 15,000 lessons each year.
We can get students from ages 3 years old up to 80 years old doing parallel turns in a very short period of time.
These prime timers, this is a marvelous group.
This group started out with 45 members in 1999.
And it's grown and grown, and we have 711 right now. So many people come up and say, we look forward to Wednesday all week, you know, just to come up and be outside. And it's amazing. I've had more people say, you can't believe how good some of these skiers are, and they're in their 70s and 80s.
Today, the Mt Spokane Ski and Snowboard Park is one of Spokane's outdoor gems. It has 1,400 acres of wonderful terrain for all levels of ability, and most agree it's a family-friendly atmosphere.
You know, the nice thing about Mt Spokane is there's a real sense of community up here. You know, we're Spokane's mountain.
Being a nonprofit, the mountain relies on the generosity of the public and the support of many volunteer groups.
That's really what keeps us running and keeps the prices low and affordable, and you know, that's a big piece of the mountain.
There's a lot more to sample at Mt Spokane than just downhill skiing. Kids and adults love the popular Children's Choice Tubing Hill. There are 25 kilometers of beautifully groomed Nordic trails and plenty of opportunities to explore by snowshoe.
This is the 14th annual pond skim.
We've got all kind of fun events throughout the year. Today we had a slush cup, pond skimming contest, and retro day. So all kinds of people running all over the mountain, having fun, dressing up crazy, getting wet in the pond.
Lodge 2 is now much roomier after a 2012 expansion. It has a full-service cafeteria and a rockin' bar.
And the Foggy Bottom Lounge, we've got bands in there all the time. Every Saturday you can catch some music.
Or you can go to the top and step back in time.
I serve chowder, chili. So we've got a curator in there who's kind of a local historian, and he's a great guy to talk to if you're ever visiting the mountain. You go right up to the Vista House, have a cup of coffee in front of the fire, and listen to Harvey tell you stories.
It's amazing how many people up there today I've known for 40 years.
I've had marvelous times on Mt Spokane, and it is still my mountain. I will ski this mountain as long as my legs will let me.
Francis Cook would be impressed if he could come today and look at what's happened to the mountain. His goal was just to get people interested and use that for public enjoyment. I think his goal would have been met.